like to have you join in on a conversation about water today in this area. Thank you.
Good.
Marion, you talk a little about the how the association was formed and the importance of watershed and watershed protection.
Well, we organized in 1969 as the Watershed Association, but we started out as a citizens group to restore the Nashua River. So we organized as the Nashua River Cleanup Committee in the mid-60s. And at that time, the Nashua River was considered one of the 10 most polluted rivers in the United States. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Were
I wasn't in Nashua. I was in Haverhill, and the Merrimack had the same problem. And again, we all agreed that the 60s was really began the movement. Really came about from the atrocious shape that our surface waters, specifically rivers, were in back in the 60s due to, for the most part, industrial contamination as well as point source contamination from cities and towns without treatment. And then obviously the EPA was formed, and they put a significant amount of money, of taxpayers' money, into stormwater management and
also
treatment.
The construction of wastewater treatment facilities.
Right.
Because back in the 1960s, before the Clean Waters Act was passed, there were no laws prohibiting the pollution of our streams and lakes. It was not against the law. In fact, in Groton, when we first moved here in 1962, where people dumped their garbage was in the Nashua River down on Dodd Road.
Wow.
And so it wasn't just Groton, but Leominster's dump was also on the Nashua River. So the river was so polluted then that people thought that it didn't really make any difference to add more pollution.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about today. Obviously, we've seen significant improvement in the surface waters of the Commonwealth and the country, and we also are doing a lot in terms of watershed and protection of our waterways, including groundwater.
Yes.
Groundwater supply, both Littleton and Groton, for example, our drinking water supply comes from groundwater. Some of the bigger cities, it comes from surface water and treatment of surface water. But in many communities outside the large metropolitan areas, groundwater is a source of our drinking water supply. And groundwater and watershed protection really go hand in hand because it's the same water. It's the discharge of groundwater into surface water, which creates the surface water impoundments that we have. Talk about what you folks are doing in terms of watershed protection and protection strategies in the community or in the region.
Right. Well, we are doing a lot. There are 31 communities in the Nashua River watershed in north central Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire. And when we organized in 1969, the first thing that we did was to create a plan for the whole watershed. Because whatever happens in one community affects another community.
Sure.
And so we're working with planning boards and conservation commissions and boards of health and other interested groups and individuals to help plan for the protection of our water resources. And in the southern part of the Nashua River watershed is Wachusett Reservoir.
Right.
And so two-thirds of the water in the south branch of the Nashua River is diverted to metropolitan Boston for their
through Nashua? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
And in fact, all of Quabbin's water that goes to metropolitan Boston
goes
goes through Wachusett Reservoir.
First, right.
So it's really, really important for all the communities to protect their water sources that drain into Wachusett Reservoir, because as we know, it's so much more expensive to treat water than it is to protect it from becoming contaminated.
That's really the lesson of the day, I think. Is after we went through the treatment process, we recognized that treatment alone is not the answer. Protection and source water protection as well as watershed protection. Both our communities, both the communities of Groton and Littleton and the region, are very much involved in not only source water protection, wellhead protection strategies, but also in watershed protection through stormwater management, and individual management of people's properties through proper turf management, and just good gardening and good practices, I guess.
Right, like not having lawns,
right?
Fertilizing,
or green lawns, right? Or finding the alternatives to green lawns,
or using herbicides, because it does have a terrible impact on the quality of our water. Right. Well, one of my concerns is that we're treating our wastewater in our wastewater treatment facilities. And, Groton's water, that's the part that's sewered, is going to Pepperell for treatment.
Right.
And then that treated wastewater is going into the Nashua
river. Right.
And it's not being returned to our groundwater.
Right. That's a big strategy now.
Yeah. And so that's a
we're working on that.
concern to the watershed.
To all of us, sure.
To all of
That's
us.
more of a
Right.
typical wastewater facility. The new method or the new model is, as you just suggested, that if you do have sewage treatment facilities for communities or areas, that you take that treated sewage and discharge it back in the ground to replenish the groundwater.
Right.
So we don't have the problem that we have in many communities in many regions is the flashiness of our streams.
Right.
They fill up after a rainstorm, and then in the summertime there's a drought because of all the water's been lost through the impervious, the covering of our properties. And that's a really big issue that's happening now throughout New England is the management of watersheds through creating of stormwater management strategies to return treated stormwater through best management practices back into the ground rather than discharging it into surface waters. And that's a big lesson that's to change.
That's right. I think that
It's a lot of work to be done there.
Also, I'm very concerned about wells that people are digging in and just to water their lawns.
Right, yeah,
and
irrigation wells.
Right, these irrigation wells. And I'm not sure that people realize that water that they're drawing from the wells is really depleting our groundwater and
hence affecting the surface waters.
And affecting the surface waters and affecting our rivers, because the rivers are dependent upon a certain base flow. And so if we are drawing water from our groundwater and letting the level of the groundwater drop, we're going to lose our rivers.
Exactly.
I've just been out in Arizona, and
they don't have rivers.
90% of their rivers are dry
Exactly.
now.
Yeah.
And they're still pumping, but they're going deeper and deeper, hundreds and hundreds of feet. And like in Groton, in Massachusetts, we get 44 inches of rain about a year. And people think, oh well, that's enough. That's going to take care of us. But they're thinking that all of this water is going back into our groundwater, and that's going to be available for people to use. But that's not really quite the way it's happening, is it?
So, yeah, some of the things that be happening in the industry, the terms we're going to start hearing are vegetative swales, rain gardens, cisterns, taking roof runoff and diverting that back into the ground.
Right.
These are all the methods that are starting to come out through Watershed Association's efforts to begin to educate the public towards methods of you at your home being able to manage and to help balance the issues that you raise of groundwater versus surface water and river flows. So there's a long way for us to go, but we're trying to get there. And it's a pleasure having the opportunity to see you again. It's been a long time, and thank you that we did it to 350. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's